Right, so we just heard from our reading in Galatians, and we're going to continue in our sort of series looking at these big words that end in shun. And our word for today is this word, redemption, which is a big word. And in many ways, the stories we just heard, really, of these lives being transformed, and those tie into this idea of redemption, because kind of a result of being redeemed, of redemption for people, is lives being transformed. And so it ties in quite nicely. But this big word, redemption, what do we mean by it? When we were doing our Bible study at house group, it struck me that maybe this concept is actually a bit trickier to understand than you might expect. We might use the word, we use it quite often, I think, in Christian circles, and we roughly know what it means when we say it. But what does it mean? We sing about it, we talk about it. We're going to be singing the song "There Is a Redeemer" after the sermon, which is a very well-known song in Christian circles. But what do we mean when we say there is a Redeemer? What do we mean that he's a Redeemer? It's a big question, and if we ask you to define it, a lot of people, as we found in house group, including myself, struggling, feel like, well, how do we define it? Does it mean something different to salvation? Does it mean something different to substitution? Does it mean something in its own right? We weren't necessarily sure. So what do we mean? Well, the main definition for the word, when you look in sort of a dictionary, is an exchange. So you may redeem a voucher, for example. You exchange it for what's on the voucher. In Monopoly, you have a get-out-of-jail-free card, and you exchange that, and your little character gets out of jail, and you can have your next go. You redeem things, so like your gift cards, say like your voucher, you might have £10 gift card, and you then go and put your voucher code in if you're shopping online, or you get your card and it's swiped at a shop, and you redeem what's on the gift card. You get £10 off your shop. That is redeeming something. It's an exchange. There's another way we sometimes use the word redeem, which is where redemption comes from, and it's in finance. So if you're ever looking at like investments and savings, you may find yourself having a bond, and a bond lasts for 2 years, and at the end of the 2 years it's matured, and when the bond matures you may redeem your bond, and when you redeem your bond it means that your money is returned to you, and that's what that means. It is no longer, your money is no longer bound up, but it is released into your care, and so there's a sense of something that is bound being released. That's another part of what we might understand when we say being redeemed. And another usage of the word is related to behaviours. So if you maybe have wronged somebody, or maybe your performance hasn't been quite up to par, then you might work hard to redeem yourself. And you do this to compensate for the negative action. It may not be a deliberate action that you've taken, but you do something to make up for it. And I did think of an example, and hopefully Barbara will forgive me, is that Barbara at the end of the service usually will make me a cup of tea after the service, which is a wonderful thing whilst I stand in the foyer greeting everyone, stops my throat being too dry. But she's been missing for a few weeks. I don't know if you've noticed, it doesn't really matter, but she's been missing for a few weeks, and so Barbara might want to make sure it's ready and waiting for me at the end of a service to redeem herself after leaving me thirsty for multiple weeks. There's no pressure on you, Barbara. It's just an example. But yeah, it's an example. We do something to redeem ourselves, to make up for something that's maybe been missed previously. And so we have here sort of three kind of key definitions for the word redeem. It's an exchange, it's a repayment, and I guess you could call that last one, it's a form of sort of compensation. to make up for something. And all these three definitions, I guess you could say they are restoring order to the world, to our lives. They are restoring order to things how they were meant to be. And in my mind, I guess you could put in a picture, you could sort of see, a bit like you get the scales of justice. And what being redeemed is putting them back to where they're meant to be, back to being balanced. So if we understand being redeemed and redemption that way, what does it mean when we look at it biblically? Biblically, it is again, it's mostly similar to these definitions, but it tends to be heavily linked to being released, being set free. And the concept, it comes up time and time again in the Old Testament. You may remember a year or so ago we looked at the book of Ruth, and we had the kinsman redeemer in there who was Boaz, and Boaz goes and redeems Ruth and Naomi. But a key chapter for the concept of redemption in the Old Testament is probably Leviticus chapter 25, which talks about what people do when they become poor, and also about the Jubilee year where people are released, freed from their debts. And the idea in Leviticus chapter 25 is that if someone was poor, what they might do is sell their property, their land, to somebody, and so that would then give them the finances to live. But what they are told isn't just that land goes to that person and you no longer have it, but it's that somebody, a redeemer, who is usually a relative, could come and redeem the land for a price. And so there would be, I guess, an agreed price, and they would come to the person who's bought the land and buy the land back and put it into the hands of the person who sold it. And then with the Jubilee, because land wasn't necessarily deemed to be owned by the person, it's owned by God, in the year of Jubilee, that person would then also get the land back if there was no one to redeem the land in the meantime. And so the land could come back, but so it meant it was redeemed for them. So it was the releasing of the land back. But then also it was tied into slavery. Someone didn't necessarily even have the land to sell. They could offer themselves to earn their keep, effectively as a servant, as a slave. And again, if someone was to offer themselves, and so they would be given the place to live, they'd be given the food to eat and whatnot. But what would happen is, again, a relative could come along and pay the price to redeem them from that, and so they would become a free person once again. And again, it comes to the Jubilee, they were to be offered the opportunity to be set free in the year of the Jubilee. And this is what being redeemed was. So there was a price that was paid, and this price set somebody free. It gave them freedom. The land was free, it was theirs, the free way to live as a free person. And so in short, redemption in the Old Testament can usually be understood as somebody or something being released based on a payment by a redeemer. And in effect, it looks a bit similar to substitution, which we looked at a couple weeks ago, where somebody takes the place of the other person, pays that price and sets them free. But what is also true in redemption in the Old Testament is that person, if they came across wealth somehow, they could go and redeem themselves or their land themselves too. So it's not quite always about somebody else taking that place, but it's about this price being paid to free someone. And then what about the New Testament? Because it's good looking at the Old Testament, but does the New Testament change things? The language of redemption in the New Testament is regularly linked into sort of the language about the substitutionary work of Christ. That is about Christ taking our place. And it's also tied in with other language as well, such as the word which is probably more often used is about ransom. Jesus declares himself as the ransom for many. And what he means by ransom is he is the price paid to set people free, effectively. So in that language, Jesus says he is the price to pay for the many to be free. And so by being redeemed in the New Testament, when it talks about being redeemed, it says, we have been released from the chains of sin. We have been claimed as Christ's own. It's a picture of an exchange that takes place. And it's that Jesus pays a price which sets us free. And we, by faith, we become his. Because we have been redeemed. We become his. And so what does our passage that we heard in Galatians tell us about redemption? As we've just understand it as this price being paid, this exchange of being set free. Ultimately, our passage from Galatians, it speaks to us about how we have been redeemed, which is basically that act of substitution, that act of exchange. And then it tells us that whilst we've been redeemed, the result of that is that we share in the promises given to Abraham, which is that we shall receive those blessings. We shall be blessed by the Lord God himself. It tells us that Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. Christ has released us from the curse. That is saying Christ has rescued us from the curse. And that curse that it's talking about, the curse is the consequence of sin that is found from the beginning of time, that separation from God, being separated from his spiritual blessings. And ultimately the curse that is spoken about is the curse that ends in death, a spiritual death. But Jesus Christ, he has become the curse for us. By becoming the curse, he's paid that price. He's paid the price. He's come in and said, I will take that on for them. And so that allows us to not be under this curse anymore. We are set free. In many ways, to use the language of the slave as we see in Leviticus, it's saying we had almost sold ourselves to the curse by disobeying God's law. We had sold ourselves to the curse. And Christ has come in, paid the price, which was for him to become the curse. And we have now been set free. We are no longer under the curse, but we are the free children of God. And Christ has gone in and taken that place. And on the cross, this is where he did it, on the cross. He took on the consequences of sin. He offered himself for us on that cross so that we could be released, so that we could enjoy the blessings of God as promised to Abraham as one of his children. But what we also know is that Christ doesn't remain there. That's where the resurrection comes in, which we'll be looking at next week. Resurrection comes in and he defeats the curse. He defeats all evil and he becomes the one who is glorified because he redeemed us. And so what does it mean for us today? Knowing that Jesus has redeemed us by paying a price and taking a place, we can know that if we are in him, we are free from the chains of sin. We can know that we are so valued by him that he was willing to pay the price for us. As great as that price was, he was willing to do it for you and for me. And we also can know that we are claimed as his own because we are redeemed. That was part of the exchange, is that we, by faith, become his. And that's a good thing. We are now his beloved, his children, because of this exchange, this redemption. And this should lead us to rejoice because our fortunes have been dramatically changed. It should lead us to live with generous hearts. We have been given an opportunity due to the generosity of our Redeemer. And so we should live wanting to give others freedom, knowing that all that we have is his. Knowing that the freedom we have, the blessings we have, they are all his, our Redeemer's. And so we should want to offer that out as well. And this is where it begins to tie in with the work of Saved Families. As we have a heavenly family, as we have a Father who has set us free in the work of Jesus Christ, as we are people who are redeemed, we should want to give that blessing to others, all these families who live in this sort of place of darkness, this place of being alone. We should have a heart to want to see these families receive the blessings we have, to have a family like we have with our Father in heaven, to bless them. It's the same thing, and give them that freedom to live life to the full as God, through work of Jesus Christ, allows us to live life to the full. Ultimately, it should lead us to live our life for God, our Redeemer. and to have our hearts full of praise because he has set us free. Knowing that instead of our destination being one of darkness, being one of the curse, we will be seeing him face to face, surrounded by the light of his glory. That is the promise that we receive because we have been redeemed. So it should lead us to rejoice. So let us respond by being people who sing with heartfelt worship. Let us be people who realize our freedom, realize where we were going and where we are now going because of being redeemed. Let us realize what that means. We are a free people, destined to be rejoicing with the Lord in heaven, surrounded by his goodness, surrounded by his glory, because of the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. And so let us respond now in this moment by singing, again with heartfelt worship, the song, There Is a Redeemer, which speaks of this truth, of this word, redemption.